Welcome to the Mindset Great podcast, a show for midlife professional women who want to rediscover their confidence so they can change their lives personally and professionally. If you are an action taker who is ambitious, goal-oriented, and driven, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Michelle Barris, retired police sergeant, small business owner, a current registered nurse, turned certified women's empowerment coach, and founder of The Great Method and the Mindset Great podcast. More importantly, I'm on a mission to change one woman at a time. Join me each week as we engage in topics and conversations with empowering women just like you. Our conversations are going to walk through the latest strategies to build your confidence, identify your goals, discover your passions, and mindset tools to allow you more time and freedom to live the life you want. I offer corporate-based workshops and one-on-one coaching. Let's break through the barriers of imposter syndrome and rediscover your confidence to change your life personally and professionally. Sit back, grab a pen and paper to take notes, and let's dive in.
Your beautiful smile, your beautiful life are waiting for you to shine bright. It's never too early or late to start.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Mindset Great podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Barris, and today I have the pleasure of having Claire Nettley with me. She is a life and recovery coach. She is here to talk about setting boundaries and how to go from surviving to thriving. She is a coach, teacher, speaker, and the founder of Better Boundaries. She helps her clients to find their no-set boundaries, sense of self, so they can show up fully in their lives and relationships without losing themselves. So Claire, thank you so much for being a guest on the Mindset Great podcast. I'm so happy to have you here with us.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right, well, let's just dive right in because I know we talked a little before we started and I have so many great questions and I know the listeners are going to find a lot of value from what you have to talk about today. And I'm super excited to introduce them to Better Boundaries, a program that you offer, and how we can get our listeners involved with that. So let's start off with how you actually became a life and recovery coach.
Well, my background is in the corporate world. So I worked in corporate for a very long time. And about 10 years ago, I suffered burnout, like really severe burnout. And it affected me physically, mentally, emotionally. And I wasn't happy. I was in a very high performance role. And I was incredibly stressed out. And on the surface, I kind of had everything on paper, right? I had the job, had the apartment, had the car, had all the things. But inside, I didn't feel okay. I felt like I had a hole inside of me that nothing could fill. And I'd been sort of chasing success, or what I thought was success. And it got to a stage where I couldn't keep going anymore. I couldn't keep running, I couldn't keep hiding, and I couldn't keep pretending that things were okay because I didn't feel okay. And eventually my body just gave out on me. So I quit that job and I took 4 months off to really sort of focus on my healing. And it's been an ongoing journey. You know, the journey of healing ourselves it's a lifelong journey. It really is. I really believe that. But it was about me kind of taking the time for myself and stepping back from this world of doing. And while I was in that job, I had studied to be a yoga and meditation teacher. So something was obviously calling me. You know, I was called to be more than do more. And it's this sort of balance between the two. And so I started yoga teaching. I started teaching mindfulness and meditation. And I learned all about boundaries. I went through this whole journey of kind of really rebuilding the relationship with myself. And it was in that journey that I learned about boundaries. And that was by far one of the biggest things it was the biggest game changer for me, learning about boundaries and really learning to getting back in touch with myself and giving myself permission to say no, giving myself permission to be true to myself. And I got so passionate about it, as people often do when they go through transformations, you know, they want to share them with others. And I got really, really passionate about this work. And And I was sort of sitting there and I was going, okay, I've got the yoga teaching, which for me is more about embodiment. It really doesn't have anything to do in my mind with stretching. It's about embodiment. It's about living in our bodies, listening to the wisdom of our bodies. I had the mindfulness and the meditation to really help my emotional world. But there was a missing piece for me. And I was trying to decide, do I want to be a psychologist? Do I want to be a counselor? Or do I want to be a coach? And I looked into coaching and I loved how there was so much behavior change. And I'd spent so much time in therapy myself, and I'm a big believer in therapy, but I knew I could really help more people, I think, through coaching. And so I looked into both and decided to become a coach, and here I am. And then I put the program Better Boundaries together, really built on my experiences, my learning, and my qualifications. And and here I am today, now kind of spreading the word about boundaries, because I think it's something women really need to hear. And I think it's about opening a conversation about boundaries and women giving themselves permission, because I think we're the caretakers, we're the ones that give all the time, we do the mental load, the emotional load. And I guess my message is to prioritize yourself rather than prioritizing everybody else. Put yourself in the picture, care for yourself, and to stop feeling so responsible for other people, which a lot of women do, and which I certainly did. And I just hear this from women all over the world that I speak to and the clients that I work with.
Yeah, it's amazing what women are capable of and what boundaries they don't set, and the boundaries that they do set, but they allow people to still cross. So that's great that you're helping women do that. So what does it mean personally, professionally, if someone's looking for a life and recovery coach? What type of person would be looking for that?
I think it would be, so I tend to work with women. It tends to be women that seek me out. And it's women that feel burnt out, they feel resentful, they feel like they're not experiencing any joy in their lives, like they're just going through the motions, they're just going through the to-do list. People that are maybe starting to drink a little bit too much, they're engaging in things to numb their emotions, they're in relationships that they're unhappy with, they're putting up with toxic relationships, and that can be with their partner, it can be with their friends, they're tolerating things that don't bring them joy, they're tolerating things that don't bring them happiness, and they kind of feel like they're going through the motions, and that other people are stepping on their boundaries. People that tends to be people that lack assertiveness, that tend to feel like other people are bullying them and pushing them around, but often really what's going on is that they're not speaking up and they're not speaking their truth. And it's people that tend to feel controlled by others as well. And I also work with a lot of women that struggle with control and struggle with a lot of fear, and they use kind of control to manage their fear and manage their anxiety. And also people that feel like they're very reactive. These are all common traits in my clients. People that are very reactive, their emotions get the better of them, they don't behave in a way that is intentional or in a way that they would like, they avoid conflict as well. That's a big one. People that struggle to say no. So those are the sort of common traits that I see in my clients.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. So when you talk about setting boundaries and how it can be beneficial in so many ways, can you describe what setting boundaries can be for many women, what that first step might be?
Yeah, sure. So for me, the first step is really getting in touch with what we're feeling. So let's say somebody, I had one client who a neighbor asked if she could feed her pet. And her instant reaction in her body was no, I've just got too much on. And she said yes. And she didn't want to do it. And then she was really resentful and angry about feeding the pet. And so it's really the first part is really getting in touch with what we're feeling and what our truth is. And then it's learning to articulate that. So, and just to kind of set the scene with boundaries. So boundaries are guidelines, standards, and limits that we have for our own behavior. They're really not about saying no to others. They're about saying yes to ourselves and articulating what is going on for us in any given moment. And so, we have boundaries with ourselves, and we have boundaries with others, and that's how we treat others and how we let others treat us. And they're not walls, they're very flexible. So we might have different boundaries with different people. And they really are just about being more authentic and speaking our truth. And most people already know their boundaries, they just don't honor them. So, or they miss the sign. So for example, burnout is a sign that someone has not had good boundaries, like I didn't. Stress, anxiety, resentment, anger, these are all signs that we are either violating our own boundaries or allowing other people to violate our boundaries. And ultimately, it's us violating our boundaries because we're not speaking up, we're not telling other people what's going on for us. So it starts with getting in touch with what our truth is, and then really learning to articulate that and exploring what the barriers are to that. And the barriers are most often fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of losing the relationship, fear of conflict. It can be any number of things, fear of shame, fear of abuse. And so we stay quiet in our relationships for fear of these things. But ultimately, the only person that abandons us is us. So it's really learning the tools to speak our truth and speak it in a way that is kind and clear. Because if someone's historically been compliant, then speaking up can feel really aggressive, but actually it's just assertive. So what I do on the course is really help women to get in touch with what their truth is. And then I give them some scripts to help them articulate what is going on for them. But they make the language their own. It's not about a kind of cookie cutter approach. I say this is the kind of language I would use, but you use what is appropriate to you, and then helping them understand context as well, because sometimes we can say no without saying no, and then sometimes it needs to be a really strong, firm no if somebody's not getting it. So there's so many different ways that we can articulate ourselves and do it in a way that's effective, because a lot of people tend to focus on the other person and what they're trying to do rather than focus on themselves and what's going on for them.
So when you say scripts, do you mean scenarios that one might encounter and how they can approach it?
Yes.
Yeah. And then when you're working with your clients, do you allow whatever the situation is that they are in or that you're discussing to kind of help customize and dictate what type of script they may need?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
Sometimes, do you have women that come to you that say a lot of these boundaries that I should be setting to some seem like common sense?
Yeah.
To others, it is a big struggle for them to be able to change themselves and recognize those boundaries within themselves. What is it that women, other than fear, do you think that's holding them back, the people pleasing that they want to do, from actually making those changes and setting those boundaries? Is there something else you think that really holds them back other than themselves?
I think it's mostly themselves, but I think it's conditioning. It really, so much of our boundaries we learn in our family of origin. And if boundaries weren't respected in childhood, and if they go unchecked, then we take those same patterns into adulthood. And then there's also, you look at societal messages around boundaries. I grew up in England, where we're terribly polite. If you stood on my foot, I would apologize for being in your way. That's just how it was in England. We're terribly, terribly polite. And fortunately, when I moved to Australia, that got knocked out of me a little bit. They're a little bit more straight in Australia than we are in England.
I think I would be like, get off my foot.
Yeah. Whereas I'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm in your way. Let me move. So So that was, and you talk about common sense, and that's a really important point, because I remember I lived with a girl years ago in a house share situation, and she would never empty the bin, and it drove me nuts. And I really wanted to talk to her about it. I couldn't. It was terrifying. It was literally terrifying. I had to go to my therapist and have a conversation with my therapist. And he said to me, I want you to say to her, I would like you to empty the bin. And I looked at him like he was crazy. It's like, I can't say that. I would like, I didn't know how to use those terms. I would like, I want, I need. They were not in my vocabulary. And eventually I had the conversation with my housemate. I was shaking. So, to some people it is common sense, and it's really easy if you've grown up in an environment where that's okay, if you've grown up in a culture where that's supported and that's natural to you. And sometimes even people can do that when it hasn't been supported, and they've just somehow got the magic touch. I did not have the magic touch with boundaries. It was something I had to learn, and it was really hard for me. And I never underestimate how terrifying it can be. To some people, it can feel literally like they're going to die. It's such a change in behavior. So they go through these kind of huge transformations, but we start small. When you're going through big change and it's really scary for the brain, we start small, and we start with boundaries with themselves, and even it's kind of learning, okay, what went on for me in that moment? What did I feel? What stopped me? What was I afraid of? I give them tools to manage their emotions, so that their emotions don't overwhelm them. I give them mindfulness tools to help with the whole process. We check in before and after, and then I give them language, and we just start small before we kind of get to the big hairy stuff, and now I've got no problem having difficult conversations. I've got no problem with conflict, because conflict, now that I have the skills, it's never really a bad thing. Is it uncomfortable? Yes, sometimes. But I would much rather that than hide in my relationships, than build resentment. And I think conflict done well brings people closer together, because you don't have two people in a relationship where all this stuff, all this unsaid stuff is festering beneath the surface, because that is way more toxic than a difficult conversation, and it's just about giving people the tools. The other thing I would say as well that I think stops us is we've grown up in this patriarchal society. I think women are still finding their voice. We're still finding our power, and we have to claim that. We have to find our voice. Men aren't going to suddenly turn around and say, here you are, here, we'll give you some of our power. We have to claim it. We have to rise up. We have to speak up, and we have to say no to things that are not right for us.
Where do you think women who work with you, how long do you think it takes? I know there's not like a 1 month, 3 months, there's not an exact time point, but when would a woman expect to feel confident in setting boundaries when they're working with you? Is there a time frame where the light bulb just kind of goes off? Like I like to say there's a 3-month minimum that you really need to work with a person to give them the opportunity to change. It's kind of like skincare, because that's what I know a lot about. And if you don't commit to changing something for 3 months, just like building a new habit, you've got to give the process time to actually make lasting change in your life. So with setting boundaries, when do they feel, when did you feel that you were confident enough in setting your own boundaries and doing life on your terms?
I think it took me probably, honestly, to get to where I am now. It's taken me 2 or 3 years, I would say, when I really started to work on this stuff. But in saying that, clients can get little breakthroughs very quickly, because I muddled through
Absolutely.
not on my own. I definitely had support, but I had to do a lot of research. I had to do a lot of practice. I had amazing support from a couple of people. But I I look now and I go, okay, there's a way that we can structure it. And this is what I was saying about starting small, because if you start too big, people get scared and go, it didn't work. So you have to kind of start small and build people up. So I would say people can start setting boundaries and learning to get comfortable with it fairly quickly, with little micro wins, little conversations, little things. And for some people, it might be practicing going to the supermarket and going to the deli counter, for example, and saying, I want that piece of fish, or I want that piece of meat. Just starting to use those terms, I want, I need, I would like. For some, it's going to dinner with a partner. And instead of, keeping quiet about what their preference is for dinner, let's say they want Mexican, but the partner wants pizza, it might be a huge breakthrough for them to say, actually, I'd like Mexican tonight. That can be huge for some people. So they can start having these little breakthroughs very early on, but it does take time to get to having those bigger conversations. And it's just a case of building confidence, sitting with the uncomfortable feelings that arise and realizing that it was okay and they're not going to die.
Right.
Just, building it up. It's teaching the body, because the reaction comes from the body, and the reaction comes from sort of history. So we have to kind of unpack that fear a little bit and kind of, just step by step, really. Yeah.
Excellent. So can you tell us about, I know that you have 6 values that you focus your business around: safety, community, growth, wholeness, joy, and ethics. Can you tell us more about these and what brought you to these values?
Yeah. So, well, safety for me, it's about keeping people safe. I had, and this is where my yoga teaching really comes in, because so many people tend to give their power away to other people. And I've seen it time and time again in the yoga community, where people idolize the teacher. They think the teacher knows what's best, and the teacher will, not all teachers, but I've seen some teachers do this, will put the student in situations where the student's not comfortable, but doesn't know how to speak up, trusts the authority of the teacher over themselves, and then hurts themselves, injures themselves. I remember once I had a teacher that tried to put me into a twist, and I said, no, that doesn't feel good on my back. And he said, just pretend it's a massage. And I'm like, no, it doesn't feel good on my back. I'm not doing it. But years ago, I would have gone along with that and then ended up with an injury. So the safety part for me is about the client understanding that they are in charge. It's about setting up a healthy relationship and not giving their authority to me. So I make that really clear when we start working together. They're in charge. They get to decide what happens, how the session goes, when they want to stop, when they want to pause. They are the authority in the session. So that's really, really important to me, is creating a safe environment. The other thing is about community, is recognizing that I alone don't have all the answers. I think there's so much power in the collective, in the wisdom of the group. And I follow a psychologist called Henry Cloud. He's based in the States, I think. Yeah, he's based in the States. He's phenomenal. And he wrote a book about boundaries, and I follow a lot of his work. And he talks about self-help being an oxymoron. I couldn't dig myself out of my own hole. I needed other people to support me. And when I share what's going on for me, other people identify with that. And when other people share, I identify with their story. We all have our own stories, but we can all learn so much from each other. So that's really about kind of the wisdom of the crowd and recognizing I alone do not have all the answers. Growth is another value. So I'm committed to my own growth. I'm always doing professional development. And growth is one of my personal as well as professional values. It's something I love growing, I love expanding, I love learning. So I'm committed to keeping that going to help my clients and to help myself. Wholeness is the recognition that we are already whole. We may feel broken, but we are whole and we are perfect. And that was such a huge breakthrough for me, was realizing that who I am is okay. What I want is okay. I don't think I really had permission before to be myself, to to say what I wanted, to articulate my needs. And so it's this wholeness part is recognizing that we are already whole and perfect, even if we feel a little bit broken. Then the other thing is joy. So the healing journey can be quite serious sometimes, and it can be quite heavy. And so it's really important to bring joy and play into it, and to remember to enjoy your life. That's what we're here for. We're here to enjoy our lives, not to just work and do and achieve. Those things ultimately aren't really what we're here to do. We're here to connect, we're here to relate, we're here to be. So that for me is a reminder to have fun and play. And then ethics is, I'm just guided by the ethical precepts of yoga, and also now with my coaching qualification. So just really honoring the ethics of the work that I do, and staying within my zone. And recommending that people get help from other people when they need it. I've got no problem doing that.
Right. That's great. Yeah. It's nice to know that there's a community out there that actually works together versus working against each other. I think that's beautiful to know. So let's talk about better boundaries that you have going on within your business right now. What is it? Who is it for? How can people find out more information about it and all the good stuff?
Okay, so it was originally designed as an 8-week course. So they have a couple of options. There's either a more structured start and end date for people that need accountability. So there's that option, or there's more of a general, start and end when you want, and run it as 8 modules. But I sort of cap that within a 3 or 4 month period, so that people don't let it go on too long, because they might sign up and then not do it. We know a lot of online courses never get done, and I don't want people to have that experience with me. I really want them to get value. So what we talk about in the course is what boundaries are, what they're not, the different types of boundaries. So there's a general introduction, talk about the different types of boundaries, what stops us from setting boundaries, signs that you need boundaries. And then we look at boundaries with ourselves. So really developing the relationship that we have with ourselves, and then boundaries around how we treat others. So there we dive into controlling behavior, respecting other people's boundaries. And it can be hard to hear other people's boundaries. We're human at the end of the day. And then we look at setting boundaries with others. So communicating our boundaries, using I statements. We go through scripts, we go through different scenarios. Students have the opportunity to role play, to bring their own kind of boundary issues to the group, because there's weekly calls, there's office hours or group coaching calls that people can join. They get recorded as well if people can't make the times, but I try to do times that are accessible to, because I get clients from the US, from the UK, and also from Australia. So I try and work to different time zones where I can, but otherwise they get recorded. So clients go on this whole journey and get supported throughout the process, and get their questions answered, and get the opportunity to role play, and also to share and hear from other women, which is so valuable. And to support other women within the group as well, which is lovely. I took a group through at the end of last year, and that was a private group. We had five or six in the group from memory, and they were such a really lovely supportive group. So the small groups I tend to do much more, or the premium offering is much more small and private. So people can look at that, find that on my website at clairenettley.com. And there's just a link there to the course as well. And I also have a free ebook for people, which is called The Art of Boundaries, where people can start sort of reading about what boundaries are and why they're so important in our lives, and how they're so important to our well-being and to the well-being of the relationships that we have. And that's in all areas of our lives, our families, work, children, partners, everybody, even our pets. I have boundaries for my dog.
Yes. You're healer, is that right? Is it a blue healer?
Yes. Red healer. Yeah.
Red healer. Okay. So I love that. I love that you give them 3 months because that in and of itself sets the tone for what the expectation is. And you're right, so many people sign up for different courses and they sign up, and the next thing you know, they never even log in to complete the course. And I love that you set that tone, because everyone will say, oh, buy my, $99 course, lifetime access. Well, you're notoriously not going to, if there's no one there holding you accountable, odds are not in your favor that you're going to go in and actually do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's done on a step-by-step process. So the lessons are, the shortest lesson I think is like 5 minutes, and the longest lesson is about 40 minutes. So people can kind of, do little bits, and they can listen on the move. There's an app with it. So, they can listen on the go, they can download the slides, but it's done sequentially. And there's a reason for that. And I've spoken to people that have done the course and kind of said, how did you find the order? Because we do a lot of the communication stuff towards the end, and they've said, we can totally see why you put it there. It makes so much sense. So it really is a step-by-step program, building confidence as they go.
So 3 months to actually access it. How long would it take a person to complete it?
Well, they could do it. It's designed originally as an 8-week course. So there's 8 modules, there's 25 lessons all up. So people could do it in 8 weeks, but if they're powering through, there's no reason why they couldn't do it quicker. The only thing I would say about spacing it out is you want to allow time to absorb the material, to reflect. So there's reflection exercises within there, there's meditations, there's relaxations as well. So you really want to allow time to absorb what you're learning and reflect on it and practice, which is why I think, minimum 8 weeks really is the best way to go.
Wonderful. Great. And then, so after the 3 months, does it stop from there? The access is no longer there after the 3 months?
What I'm looking at the moment is doing an extension of that. So that's a really great question. I'm just working on that because people are saying that they want to keep working with me. So I'm looking at, okay, how can I build on the end of that, like an ongoing sort of coaching program that people can stay in touch and get what they need. Right. Because it's a long game. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think of the refresher. I need a spritzer after my 3 months, and it might be month 6.
Yeah.
I need a little bit of Claire in my life. So how do I go find Claire?
Yeah.
So I will make sure that in the show notes, we have your website. I know your Facebook, the clairenettley.com. And then you're on Instagram as well.
Yes. Claire_Nettley. Yes. Okay. Yeah. And the other way people can work with me, just going back to what you were saying about after the 3-month program, I do one-on-one sessions as well for people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Love it. So what advice with the women, I have a 85%, we'll say 90% listener capacity of women. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to them as to what they should do right now as far as their next step for setting that first boundary? And to me, that's a no-brainer. Go to your website and set the boundary of self-development and personal growth. Mm. So what would you say women need to do? Is that the first step is making the choice to invest in themselves?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. For sure. I'm really proud of the course, and I know it's giving the people I work with really big transformations. And the other thing I would say is to really just start listening to yourself. Listen to yourself. Notice and start building trust with yourself. So notice when you say yes, but you mean no, and ask yourself why you did that and what are you so afraid of, and explore the possibility that you can articulate yourself without losing the relationship, because this is absolutely what happens. There are some people that will fall away when you find your voice, and they're not meant to be in your life. Mm-hmm. But the people that are meant to be in your life will stay, and they will love it because they want you to be you. So mm-hmm. I would say start connecting in, really listening to yourself. And even if it's a small step, just practice one thing. And it might be saying, no, I don't want to do that tonight, or I can't this weekend. And the other thing I would say, when you're articulating yourself, your wants and your needs, don't justify. Don't over-explain. Keep it really simple, really clear. No, I can't make it tonight. Let's catch up next week. A lot of people that struggle with boundaries over-explain. and it's not necessary. So really simple is the best way to go. Brene Brown says clear is kind, and I can't put it any better than that.
Yeah, I believe I saw something today. Clear is kind, something unclear is unkind, or something to that effect. I actually saw that today, and it was a Brene Brown quote that they had put out there. And you are absolutely correct in saying that. And I think where a lot of people get delayed or hemmed up is that they feel like they have to justify their response when the response in and of itself is justification enough. And if it needs to be elaborated upon, then the person that you're giving the answer to will solicit something to require you to elaborate. But we as women just tend to want to overgive our responses for what we need and for what we will or won't do. And especially, I know that for many years, I was notorious for over explaining why I couldn't do something. And it wasn't until I started listening to myself going, why am I justifying this to you? My answer is no, or this is why I cannot do it. So absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah. And if you don't have any plans, that's still a plan. I think people sometimes go, well, I wasn't going to do anything. I was just going to lie on the couch tonight and read a book. That's a plan. And that's okay. You can still say no. You're allowed to have free time. And that reminds me, when you said that, reminds me of another part in the course, which I didn't mention, which is over and under responsibility. So a lot of women feel overly responsible for other people's feelings. And what we cover in the course is what they're responsible for and what they're not responsible for. So they can let go of feeling the need to protect other people and to protect their feelings. It doesn't mean we don't care. It just means we stop running our lives based on how other people might feel about our actions.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I love it. Well, Claire, thank you so much. If the ladies want to keep our conversation going, they can head over to our free Facebook group, Mindset Great Empowerment Coaching for Women. I will have all the information on how to contact Claire in the show notes. Is there anything else you would like our guests to know before we say goodbye?
I think that's everything. Just thank you. Thanks, Michelle, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It's always great to talk about this stuff and know that women are going to hear this, because I think it's so important for all of us.
I agree. I think that you and I have the same type of mission in healing one woman at a time and really letting them find their best version of themselves. So I thank you again for coming on, and I hope that you have a great day, because I know it's morning there in Australia and it's evening here in the States. And hopefully in the near future, we can have you on the show again and kind of catch up with new things that are going on in your life.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Your beautiful smile, your beautiful life.
Thanks for listening to the Mindset Great podcast. If you've been loving this podcast and it is helping you approach your life and career in a brand new way, I have 3 requests/small favors. Number 1, make sure you hit subscribe so you're getting all the latest episodes to this podcast. Go ahead, I'll wait. Do it right now so you don't miss anything. Number 2, would you be so kind as to give me a review on Spotify or iTunes? Reviews help other professional, career-driven, and highly skilled women just like you find this podcast, and it lets them know they don't want to miss anything. It also helps the podcast climb in rankings, so think of it as empowering women to the top, paying it forward. And number 3, please join our Facebook group, Mindset Great Coaching. It is only for professional women and only those who are serious about changing their lives. If you're ready to take massive action and invest in yourself and your career, I would be honored to help you. Head on over to the Facebook group and let's get connected. Until next time, allow yourself grace and be beautiful.
Rise up and shine. With every morning comes a new chance to start over. Every day is a treasure.